Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this subject that I found very particularly interesting. I believe this video is going to be that by that of the segment and by that of the show on ESPN, of course, ESPN First Take. And of course, for those of you all know that have not been around my channel before, or for those of you that have been around here for a while, whatever the context may be, what my channel usually mainly is that of a debate channel where I react either to certain YouTube videos or react overall to certain debates that I find very particularly interesting, where I try to analyze them the best that I can and I try to put a logical and objective spin on things. Because a lot of the times, of course, certain people try to promote certain narratives that in my opinion oftentimes can be harmful or against at least what I view overall to oftentimes be the truth. And of course, narratives overall, they're everywhere, especially in that of the sports media. Doesn't matter what sport that it is. Now, of course, as my YouTube channel name gives it away, I do usually mainly talk about that of boxing and MMA. This is mainly a combat sports channel. But I do still have a broad love of sports in general. And every once in a while, if you've been around my channel long enough, you know that at times I will talk about tennis or the ATP circuit, professional tennis. Sometimes I'll talk about NFL football. And at times, like I'm going to do today, I'll also talk about NBA basketball. And NBA basketball is a sport that I've always really thoroughly enjoyed watching because I think that it's a sport that really requires a high level of skill, a high level of IQ, and overall a high level of being able to handle big pressurized situations, which of course you need basically in any big sport. But basketball, in my opinion, at least out of any the American team sports, you can truly debate on and know that you have to be the best all-around skilled player overall at your position to debatably be a championship level player in that overall category, at least in NBA basketball. You can argue that it requires the most amount of skill out of all team sports, at least debatably, in my opinion, just because you have to work on both sides of the floor. There's a multitude of skill sets that you have to add to your game overall, and you also have to have a high degree of IQ for the sport. But anyways, just to get to the point of the conversation and just to get to the point of this debate, Mr. J.J. Redick, Stephen A. Smith, and overall Kendrick Perkins, they ended up having a debate, of course, not too long ago, only a few days ago, about who debatably is right now the leading candidate for the NBA MVP. And of course, most people overall, at least at the current moment in time, they believe that it is currently an open and shut case. A lot of people believe that it is Nikola Jokic and that he is more than likely going to receive his third straight MVP and that he is going to be the third player, at least I believe, only the third player in the NBA's history to earn 3 consecutive MVPs, along, of course, with Larry Bird, who was the last person I believe to do it, and then, of course, before Larry Bird, Mr. Wilt Chamberlain. When it came down to it, maybe Bill Russell did it as well, but I can't necessarily remember. One of you guys might have to correct me. I think it was only Wilt Chamberlain and Larry Bird, but I have to see on that. Maybe Kareem as well, but I think only Larry Bird and Wilt Chamberlain. But anyways, Kendrick Perkins is one of those guys that does not truly believe that Nikola Jokic overall is so much overall as an open and shut case for the leading candidate of MVP. In fact, he's even gone as far to state that I believe that he doesn't truly believe that Nikola Jokic is the leading candidate for MVP this season. He's also gone as far to state that the coverage that Nikola Jokic has gotten overall and the standards for him overall, he believes that a big part of the reason why a certain amount of people believe that it's an open and shut case is because he's receiving better coverage. At least he's somewhat alleged that because he is a Caucasian player, or overall that the NBA voters, that they might be voting more for him because he is a Caucasian player, which of course is somewhat of a big alleged statement when it comes down to it. So we're going to see overall what Mr. Stephen A. Smith overall and what J.J. Redick and what Kendrick Perkins said, and I'm going to give my analyzation and my perspective overall about, does Nikola Jokic truly deserve to be the MVP of this season, or does Kendrick Perkins have more of a point overall than what some of the voters overall truly believe about Nikola Jokic? Is it because overall he is mainly a Caucasian player? Is that overall the big part of the reason of why he is looked at as the open and shut MVP of this season? Or do both sides maybe have a little bit of a point? Who do I believe maybe is more right in this debate? Well, let's get into it. Let's see overall what they have to say.
Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray led Denver's comeback win over the Raptors. Jokic almost had another triple-double, finishing with 17 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, 1 assist shy of that triple-double. Winners in 8 of their last 9. Denver improved to 46 and 19 on the year, 30 and 4 at home. Let's flash back to Perk and JJ on Jokic.
Well, don't come giving me this stuff about a triple-double. I don't want to hear that. Since you're scared to say it, I'm going to say it. I'm watching Jokic pass the ball, and I'm watching his guys catch and shoot. No hesitation, good or bad shot. And players know what their stats are.
I'm just trying to think of a country phrase.
Let me state this really quickly. Because Kendrick Perkins overall, of course, is bringing up the quote-unquote stat padding points for Nikola Jokic overall, that he's stat padding, and that when you take a look at a certain amount of the games overall, that is not quite as impressive. At least I believe that that's the point that he was trying to get across. Now, why is Kendrick Perkins overall bringing this up? Is it because all in all he takes a look at Nikola Jokic and he says, what the hell is this white boy overall doing, getting his third straight MVP without winning a championship? Is it because Kendrick Perkins has a very big racial issue? I'm not really quite sure if it's because Kendrick Perkins has a very, very big racial issue. Now, is he looking at Nikola Jokic overall in the same way that probably a lot of other black players or African American players, whatever, they feel comfortable calling themselves as when it comes down to it? Is it possible that overall there's a lot of people that are looking at Nikola Jokic the same exact way? Absolutely. No doubt about it. There is a lot of black players and probably a lot of black people in the media that are looking at Nikola Jokic that way. No doubt about it when it comes down to it. But overall, is it really because Kendrick Perkins is really taking a look at that and he truly believes that the bar is being moved 100% compared to Giannis or Joel Embiid as what he maybe stated? Or is it maybe what I'm predicting overall a little bit more? Is it because when it came to the two boys that he likes to rep for, with LeBron James and Russell Westbrook, when it came down to it, with them averaging triple doubles, is he a little bit pissed off, or does he have a little bit of vitriol overall for that? Because he says, well, what's different overall between Russell Westbrook and Nikola Jokic? What's different between LeBron James, and Nikola Jokic? Because when those guys average triple doubles overall, they were criticized for it. But Nikola Jokic is doing it, and then all of a sudden, he's the leading candidate for MVP, and he's not getting the same criticism, which I somewhat understand to a degree. And you're going to see Kendrick Perkins bring up that point. But here's the difference. LeBron James, a lot of the times, if we're just going to bring up him, when it comes down to it, he stat pads all in all, especially in losing situations, and that of the NBA Finals. And we didn't hear Kendrick Perkins say anything bad about it, how LeBron James basically was just stat padding overall, especially in losing parts of that series overall, pretty much just to save his ass and deflect overall blame for losing that series. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that they had necessarily the talent to beat Golden State overall that year in completion. But LeBron James, all in all, that is regular LeBron James 101, usually in that of the NBA Finals, especially in that of losing situations. He will overall get a triple-double, or he will stat pad so he can say, oh, look at me, I have all these statistics, you can't blame me, it's not my fault. When it comes down to it, even in losing situations, he'll get certain garbage time stats when it comes down to it, or he'll make sure overall to get his triple-double in his ball-dominant system. Overall, especially if he knows that he's not going to win, he'll overall get those triple doubles so he can say, well, look at me, it wasn't my fault, you can't blame me. And as for Russell Westbrook, when it comes down to it all in all, probably the biggest stat pattern that I've ever seen in NBA basketball history, at least during my time. Where was this same talk when it came to Kendrick Perkins, a guy that loves to rep for both Russell Westbrook and LeBron James? Where was this same talk overall with them quote-unquote stat padding? All of a sudden with Nikola Jokic, all of a sudden you start to bring it up. And in my opinion, that is the main motivation with Kendrick Perkins. He takes a look overall at the guy that he overall sees as a very, very good friend in Russell Westbrook, I believe, because they were former teammates when it came down to it. And on top of that, he takes a look at LeBron James or Russell Westbrook, two guys that he defends very, very blatantly in the media, in the NBA media. He takes a look at them and says, well, why is Nikola Jokic not getting the same criticism as those two players? Which I get it, but it's not completely 100% in the same context, because I don't see Nikola Jokic as a ball dominator. And certain people, of course, they can say all they want to that, oh, he's padding the stats and all this other shit. You can say that all you want to. And I'm sure to a certain degree, Nikola Jokic probably is trying to pad his stats to a certain degree. But at the end of the day, Nikola Jokic has, I believe, about the 49th best usage rate right now in all that of the NBA. When you talk about the criticism compared to that of Russell Westbrook and that of Nikola Jokic, you really can't even compare the two players because they're really not even that close. Russell Westbrook is a guy to where the average, the type of numbers that he did to average a triple-double, he's a guy that has to pretty much has the number one usage rate throughout the whole entire NBA. He has to dominate the ball, whether for better or for worse, of the sake of the team when it comes down to it, to average his triple-double, and he's going to shoot about 43%, 42% from the field. Hell, he may even shoot 39% from the field when it comes down to it. What we know about Nikola Jokic overall, and Kendrick Perkins is going to make this point later on, and he thinks overall that the lesser shot attempts hurt Nikola Jokic's case. I actually believe that it possibly strengthens them. Because what that tells me is that Nikola Jokic, even with his lower usage rate, at least compared to that of some of the other possible candidates, is that he can still dominate the game when he doesn't have the basketball within his hands. And that when he does have the basketball within his hands, he can actually put up a triple-double because he is so efficient even if he only gets a limited amount of shots. Certain players like that have a James Harden and Russell Westbrook. Like certain people are taking a look at those players and they're saying, well, oh, why were those guys not getting credit for their triple doubles and blah blah blah? Because you can't even compare those two players to that of a Nikola Jokic. Jokic can do things that those players could never do, especially efficiency wise. Nikola Jokic is averaging 24 points per game on 63% shooting for a center. And then on top of that, he's averaging, I believe, over 10 rebounds and over 10 assists. Like what Nikola Jokic is doing this season, at least statistic-wise. And on top of that, he has the leading record in that of the NBA's Western Conference. So in my opinion, Nikola Jokic, he is the leading candidate.
That is equivalent to Perk being a hater.
However, what I will say all in all is this. In my opinion, I'm not going to say that it's necessarily an open and shut case. I do believe more than likely that Nikola Jokic, that he is going to get his third consecutive MVP. I think that the media is a little bit behind him. And if you want to make the case that him being a Caucasian player, that it certainly overall doesn't it doesn't hurt his chances of winning the MVP. Because, of course, the NBA voters, they want to probably vote for someone that can relate to them and that they can push out to the Caucasian masses. If you want to maybe say that, listen, that's fine. I wouldn't really have a problem with that. But if you're trying to make the point that the main reason why Nikola Jokic is the favorite to win the MVP is because he's a Caucasian player, nah, in my opinion, that point is not going to work.
Are you sitting here and saying that the reigning two-time league MVP is having his numbers padded?
You heard what the hell I said.
Love Perk. I strongly disagree with this.
Your best player on the floor has 8 games where he has single-digit shot attempts. Make sense to me.
Nikola Jokic does not care.
What that means, Kendrick Perkins, is that Nikola Jokic can dominate the game without overall having the basketball in his hands the basketball in his hands 24/7. Unlike your boys LeBron James overall and that of Russell Westbrook. Once again, where is the same criticism of LeBron James or Russell Westbrook? And no, this is not me saying all in all that, Nikola Jokic is greater than LeBron James. That is not what I'm saying. But it is no secret that those two, Russell Westbrook and LeBron James, that they are ball dominators. There's a reason why when they were the leaders of their team, they pretty much lead in every single statistic. And that's why Russell Westbrook, he underwhelmed in certain moments in his career, and why LeBron James also underwhelmed in certain moments of his career. Because they are certain guys overall that are ball dominators. It just is what it is. And that has cost LeBron James certain championships. And that's why Russell Westbrook overall has never overall been able to lead his team past the first round once Kevin Durant ended up leaving that team. It just is what it is.
Stats, does not care about averaging a triple-double. Nikola Jokic, I hate to tell everyone, doesn't care about winning an MVP.
And I want to tell the Denver fans.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think overall that was a 100% accurate statement. Just my opinion. I think, of course, Nikola Jokic pays attention to his numbers. I think, of course, all in all, that he cares about winning an MVP. Because if you're going to be only the third player within the NBA's history, at least from what I remember, if that's correct, that is going to win 3 consecutive MVPs. Of course, all in all, that's going to be very important of you. Of course it is. But I don't know if you can really allege that he's quote-unquote stat padding to the same degree that what a Russell Westbrook or what a James Harden was. I don't think all in all that you can really allege that because Jokic is doing it in the flow of a game. Russell Westbrook is going to get his numbers by hook or by crook when it comes down to he's going to get his numbers, whether it's to the benefit or whether it's not to the benefit of the team.
I am not associated with Kendrick Perkins' case.
If you ask anyone that's been around him, he doesn't fight the game. He just makes the right play every time. He cares about winning a championship.
Guys know if they're 3 points away from having 50, if they're 2 assists away from having a triple-double. He starts searching.
And once again, Kendrick Perkins' point overall about, Nikola Jokic, he has a multitude of games where they won overall and he has single-digit overall, shot attempts. Once again, if Nikola Jokic maybe was averaging 15 to 17 points per game, you might overall have a little bit of a better point. But in my opinion, the fact that Nikola Jokic is still averaging 24 points per game on 63% shooting for a center, when it comes down to it all in all, that pretty much tells me that he can make any shot that he really can. And Nikola Jokic, because of his great skill set, when it comes down to it, he's a great mid-range shooter. He's a great long-range shooter. He's also shooting, I believe, about 40% from the three. When it comes down to it, he's a guy overall that can get inside the paint overall, do a little bit of work in there, do work up close. He can pretty much do whatever shot you need him to do. However, what I will say is this. There is going to be a lot of pressure on Nikola Jokic, in my opinion, this season, especially to win the NBA championship. Because if you're a 3-time consecutive MVP, you have to eventually win the championship. And in my opinion, the championship this season, between the Nuggets, between probably the 76ers, and the Bucks, and maybe, 2 to 3 more teams out there, it pretty much is wide open. Maybe the Boston Celtics, maybe possibly the Clippers if they can make a run, although I do not trust them. I haven't trusted them ever since they lost to the Nuggets over all those few years ago when it comes down to it, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe the Grizzlies if Ja Morant comes back in good form. But we'll see what happens. Maybe the Mavericks, but I don't really trust them right now either.
For them assists.
The best argument I can make of why this is such a ludicrous statement, they're 23-0 when he has a triple-double. Let's not make up a narrative about a player that is just so unbased in reality.
You know what? We're like the UFC. We give you the debates that you want here. But in all seriousness, we're all teammates, but this is a debate show. So, JJ, let's continue it. You're up first.
I'm going to go ahead and apologize to Perk, because I know that he doesn't like advanced stats, but often advanced stats inform us. They provide insight. They often reinforce.
Well, you know what? Let me also state this, because overall, now that I think about it, I probably should mention this point. Because JJ Redick overall brought up a point overall that can sometimes be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on when you're bringing it up, or sometimes a good point and sometimes a bad point. And he says overall that they were about 23-0 or whatever the record was all in all, to where Nikola Jokic, he's averaging 10 assists or whatever it may be. But a lot of people also pull up those stats with certain players like Russell Westbrook and LeBron James. A lot of people always say the same bullshit about, they need to overall lead in every single stat for those teams when it comes down to it. But like I said, Nikola Jokic, he's not someone that's a ball dominator. I think Kendrick Perkins takes a look at Nikola Jokic and he's taking a look at his numbers, his triple-doubles, and they're saying, well, all the criticism came to Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Why overall is Nikola Jokic not getting the same criticism? Could it be because he's a Caucasian? And I understand where he's coming from. But you cannot necessarily compare Nikola Jokic to those type of players because he has shown, even with a lower usage rate, because I believe he's like 50th or 49th, somewhere around there in usage rate this season within that of the NBA. When it comes down to it all in all, once again, when it comes to James Harden and Russell Westbrook to average those type of numbers, to average a triple-double for the season, overall, they pretty much have to have the ball in their hands 24/7 throughout a game. That's pretty much overall what has to happen because they're nowhere near as efficient and smart overall as what a Nikola Jokic is on the basketball court.
Worse, what we see. So they kind of complement the eye test. I know you're an eye test guy and you don't like advanced stats, but I might use a few here. I just want to react because I didn't hear this, the idea that his teammates shoot good or bad shots. So Second Spectrum, wonderful company, they installed tracking cameras in every arena 10 years ago. And their technology has evolved. And one thing we've learned from that is we can actually track which players create. And Nikola Jokic is top 5 in shot quality created. So if you watch them play, Perk, and I know you do, sometimes you might not stay up late on the...
Kendrick Perkins sounds like he needs CPR.
Mountain time zone, but if you watch them play, when he's deciding whether or not to shoot or score, he's often making a read, because that's what good basketball players do. They make reads. So if he's getting a double, he's going to kick. If he sees the help coming too early, he's going to swing it to the corner. It's a good pass. What's the most efficient corner three in basketball? It's a corner three. Look, Perk, I want to touch on something that they didn't bring up. This idea that Dirk and Steve Nash were favored to win the MVP because they're white. First of all, you stop short at 1990. That was your cutoff point for players to win MVP not in the top 10 in points per game, which is a stupid stat to judge MVP on. This isn't...
I agree. And it's no offense against Kendrick Perkins, but every argument that I've seen him in overall in an NBA debate, whether we talk about Steph Curry, Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, really no matter overall what the conversation be, and now Nikola Jokic, even if he brings up something that might be potentially relevant, he always puts it in such a stupid-ass way to where he pretty much never shows any intelligent points. And it's no offense against Kendrick Perkins, but he just doesn't come across to me as the sharpest tool in the shed. It just is what it is.
Middle school. 1990, Magic won it. In 89, Magic won it. 87, Magic won it. 87,
Well, here's the point that I'll say about that. Magic Johnson was a point guard. And certain people, they take a look at Magic Johnson and they always like to tear him down because they take a look at him and they're like, oh man, Magic can never score like LeBron James or some of these other players. Magic wasn't asked to score as much as those guys. It wasn't that he couldn't, because you can take a look at his career. There was a multitude of 40-point games, possibly even 50-point games that Magic Johnson had in his career. I believe at one point in time, overall, his first run in the playoffs, he replaced Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I believe, at center, and I believe put up 40-something games in a playoff game. But if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. Anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, Magic Johnson was what you would call the point guard overall back in the day. Some people would overall call it the prototypical point guard or the regular point guard overall throughout the 80s and 90s and throughout the earlier times all in all. Because now they're more combo guards. They're more a mix of shooting guard and that of a point guard because they shoot the ball so often when it comes down to it. But anyways, Magic Johnson, as a point guard, your job is to facilitate the ball. And overall, once again, is to get everyone involved. And if you're doing that, if that's your job, you're not going to have as many shot attempts. That's just common sense. Now, one could argue that Nikola Jokic, that he's different from Magic Johnson because he's a center. And he's getting off overall more than likely more shot attempts so that he should be. And one could argue, if you wanted to, that maybe he should be averaging more than that at 24 points per game. But even then, that would be, in my opinion, still a weak argument.
He was 10th. 89, he was 15th. 90, he was 18th. Okay? We judge MVP year to year. You also say...
And just to talk about that Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki point really quickly, because Kendrick Perkins, all in all, tried to debate, all in all, that, oh, well, you know, I'll let it marinate. I'll let you guys decide that the only 3 MVPs overall that ever won it overall, they never, that didn't lead in the top 10 of scoring. They were all Caucasian, when it came down to it. Well, at the end of the day, Dirk Nowitzki, when he won his MVP, I believe won about 65 to 67 games. So at the end of the day, Dirk Nowitzki, once again, you can mention that shit all you want to. But at the end of the day, Dirk Nowitzki still had great numbers, and he had the leading record in the NBA. Okay, as for Steve Nash, he had over 50 wins on a team that was formerly distraught, I believe, without him. Each and every single one of those seasons that he overall was on the Phoenix Suns. So a lot of people love to bitch and moan about how he didn't deserve those MVPs. Well, in my opinion, he definitely deserved the first one. The second one, I would have to look around and look at all the stats that year. But the main ones that always bitch is the Kobe Bryant fans. Probably the craziest ass fan base overall. Either them or the Deontay Wilder fan base. The Allen Iverson fan base is up there as well. And LeBron James fan base. All those guys. The Kobe Bryant fan base, out of all of them, the Kobe Bryant fan base might be the craziest and most delusional fan base that I've personally ever seen in my life. Or maybe the Allen Iverson fan base. They might be the most delusional. The Kobe Bryant fan base might be the most crazy overall when it comes down to it. They defend Kobe overall like they're his God-forbidden wife when it comes down to it. But anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, or his God-lovely life, his lawfully wedded wife. Anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, most people bitch, moan, and complain that Kobe should have won the MVP that year. And you could possibly have a case. I believe he averaged like 31 points per game. But the team also, I believe, went about 42 and 40. Steve Nash, I believe, won about 55 games that year. Some, of course, would debate for Shaq. I would have to look and see his statistics for that season. But when it comes down to it, all in all, Steve Nash, you could certainly debate, still even deserve the second MVP. Even though, of course, the second MVP, in my opinion, was not as strong as his first. But anyway.
The criteria or the goalposts change year to year for certain players. No, it doesn't. We vote on the MVP. Hold on. We vote on the MVP based on that season. We vote on the MVP based on that season. It is a regular season award. Previous playoff runs have nothing to do with it. It's a regular season award for the most valuable player. And we can measure that, Perk. So maybe voters have gotten smarter. I want to talk about Dirk and Nash real quick, and I'll let you jump in. Dirk Nowitzki led the league in win shares in both 06 and 07. Led the league in offensive win shares in both 06 and 07. So, yeah, he wasn't top 5 or whatever he was, top 10 in scoring his MVP season. The Dallas Mavericks were 67 and 15. They had the best record in the NBA. In 05, Steve Nash.
Yes, thank you, Mr. JJ Redick, for bringing up overall that point. Dirk Nowitzki had the best record in the NBA. So this stupid shit that Kendrick Perkins brings up or alleges that Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash, that they were somewhat helped because they were Caucasian players. Don't get me wrong, being a Caucasian player, especially in an environment where it is predominantly dominated by that of black athletes, of course that helps. But we can take a look at it overall. We can take a look at other sports and we can say, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes, the reason why he's so hyped up and compared to Tom Brady at this early age is because he's really the first all-time great and super dominant black quarterback when it comes down to it all in all. We can say that, that, oh, he's only hyped up because of that reason. He's overrated. We could say that all we want to. But once again, it's very easy overall to go down that slope. It's very easy a lot of the times to make that excuse, especially if it's a certain athlete that you don't particularly like or that all in all you don't want to be on a certain level. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes all in all it is, a real excuse. Sometimes it's a valid excuse. But you have to be very, very careful with that because, of course, that's going to be a part of it. If you're a certain demographic that is very dominant in a particular profession to where usually you don't see that demographic there, of course, they're going to be marketed more. And, of course, that's going to be a part of the package. They're going to be overall, promoted a little bit differently. They're going to be promoted a little bit more. Do you think that Patrick Mahomes is only talked about quite as much because overall he's just a great quarterback? No, of course not. There's a lot of media analysts overall that, of course, are looking at him and saying this dude has the potential to be the greatest of all time, and we've never had a black quarterback on the level of that before. All right, when it comes down to it, when you take a look at Tiger Woods and that of golf, same thing when it came down to it. Of course, he's still an all-time great player when it comes down to for that of golf because of the amount of Masters and tournaments that he has won. So that's why when it comes to us analyzers, for those of us all know that are going to take a look at it, we have to rank things logically and objectively. Of course, that's always going to be a part of it. And that's why I review a certain amount of YouTube channels or something like that, because a lot of these points overall sound very relevant, because some of them are. We can take a look at it, and I review, once again, certain boxing videos all the time where certain channels talk about Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury, and they love to say this shit about, oh, well, yeah, they're good, but a big part of the reason why they get so highly promoted and ranked is because they're Caucasian and they have the complexion for the protection. And I understand that to a certain degree. There are certain Caucasian athletes and Caucasian fighters or, Caucasian, overall athletes, once again, that they do have a little bit of the complexion for the protection. But if you're going to allege all in all that a lot of their greatness is a charade, overall, like what I've seen overall with certain boxing channels alleged with Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury, then no, you'd be incorrect. And that's why you have to be very, very careful with that, because it's very easy to go down that stupid-ass rabbit hole when it comes down to it. Now, sometimes, it's more reality overall than what it seems, or sometimes it's a little bit more real with certain fighters when it comes down to, like Tommy Morrison back in the 80s or back in the 90s, whenever he fought, I believe, back in the 90s. That was an example of a fighter that was a great white hype, at least to a certain degree. But Nikola Jokic very clearly is an MVP caliber player. And if you're going to allege that Nikola Jokic, that he is the leading MVP candidate of this season and that he's not getting criticized the same because he's a Caucasian player, Well, you can debate that all you want to, but if you're comparing it to that of Russell Westbrook and James Harden, for example, Nikola, you can't really say it that he's not getting criticized purely just because he's a Caucasian, even though that might be the case in certain circumstances, because he's just a different player. The circumstances are not in the same realm. It just really isn't.
Was the driver of the #1 offense in the league, a team that jumped.
Now, what I will say is this, and I ended up watching a video by that of a boxing channel that here and there I tend overall to review, by Mr. 78 Sports TV, and he brought up something on the note that was a decent point, and he said, well, the bar tended to move on the note with Giannis Antetokounmpo, because with Giannis Antetokounmpo, it was all about, well, he needs to win a championship before he wins another MVP. And that is the truth. If you're maybe saying that, well, why is Nikola Jokic, why are certain people overall saying that he does not need to win a championship, but Giannis Antetokounmpo and Joel Embiid do, or all these other guys, then that'd be a relevant point. That would be a relevant point. But the MVP is a regular season award when it comes down to it. And at the end of the day, you can 100% debatably debate that Nikola Jokic is a 3-time MVP. No doubt about it. He has had his own standing as a 2-time MVP. No doubt about it when it comes down to it, and especially this season.
He wins and had the best record in the NBA.
Okay.
In 06 to me is one of the weirdest MVP seasons ever. You can make an argument Nash probably shouldn't have won it, but he was still the driver of the #1 offense in the league. The two best teams that year, the Detroit Pistons, 64 wins, the San Antonio Spurs, 63 wins. Guess what? They didn't have a top, their top scorers weren't in the top 20 in the NBA that year. So that was just a strange thing. You could have given it to Kobe. You could have given it to Shaq. You could have given it to Tim Duncan. They gave it to Steve Nash. It's not because he was white.
It was just a strange thing. It was just a strange.
But why did you cut it off at 1990 though? Because that was convenient. That was convenient.
I'm just saying.
That was convenient.
Hold on. It was just a strange thing that it just happened. It was just a strange thing. In 2006, when Kobe averaged 31, when he was playing with Kwame Brown and Smush Parker,
and what was the record that year? 42 and 40. They were 42 and 40.
Yes, exactly. And it's no offense against Kendrick Perkins, but once again, for a guy that was a former basketball player, I mean, don't get me wrong, he was always kind of a bench player anyway, but he just comes across as a fucking idiot. Like, come on, dude. Like, yeah, you can mention all this stupid bullshit when it comes down to this is what Kobe Bryant fans always do. And I'm not really sure if Kendrick Perkins is a major Kobe Bryant fan or anything like that. I'm not quite sure. But I know that he's a big fan of Russell Westbrook and LeBron James. All in all, because him and Russell Westbrook are very good buddies when it comes down to it. And I think that's a big part of the main motivation. And also he likes LeBron James when it comes down to it. So that's probably two parts of the motivation. But, you know, Kobe Bryant fans, they always love to bitch and moan about how Kobe Bryant deserved the MVP. Listen, if you wanted to give it to him, that's your business. But at the end of the day, JJ Redick is correct. Their record was barely over 500. It just is what it is. Overall, once again, they were 42 and 40. Steve Nash, I believe, for like 3 straight years or a couple years, had the Phoenix Suns over 50 wins every year. And almost around 55 or 60.
So,
let him speak. He's the most valuable player.
They made the playoffs with that roster.
So did Steve Nash, dude. And really, if we're going to go there, Steve Nash, I believe, beat Kobe Bryant in the playoffs 2 years in a row. And if we are really going to take the playoffs route overall, which I don't usually like to do in terms of MVP awards, Steve Nash, let's not forget, I believe it was either in the 2006 season or maybe the season after. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was the 2006 season, though. That was the season where Kobe Bryant decided overall to choke a 3-1 lead to that of Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns, if we're going to go there.
Kobe off that team, they probably win 8 games. Okay, so let's make that very.
Listen, dude, you can make that case overall with a lot of players. Steve Nash took a Phoenix Suns team that I believe was not even that great of a contender, or really not even a contender at all, if I remember, and he brought them to 50 to 60 something games almost each and every season. Like, come on, dude.
Very clear. Now, since you want to talk about when I was saying...
And people will take a look and they'll say, well, Kobe Bryant, though, he averaged like 31 points per game. That's great. You know, that's great. And he did lead them to the playoffs. That's great on him. You know, but you just can't take a look overall at points per game and shots attempted to who should be the MVP. That's a stupid-ass fucking point. And that's what I'm saying. You know, for Kendrick Perkins being a former basketball player, he should know better than this.
preaching about moving the goalposts.
Because when you take a look at certain players that especially move very, very well off the ball, when it comes down to it, including that of a Steve Nash. But if you take a look at Steph Curry, like I remember when certain people, including Kendrick Perkins, they would always debate that Russell Westbrook is greater than that of a Steph Curry because they're like, oh man, take a look at his triple doubles. When it comes down to yeah, those triple doubles are great in the regular season when it comes down to it. But there's a reason why even without Kevin Durant, Steph Curry can win multiple championships and Russell Westbrook can't. You know why that is? Because he's a ball dominator. And Steph Curry, when it comes down to it all in all, if he does average a triple-double, it's going to be in the flow of the game. See, what a lot of people overall don't understand about basketball is that playing off the ball is just as important, sometimes even more important, than playing on the ball. A player, an all-time great player, is not just going to be great on the ball, but off the ball as well, or without the ball. And Nikola Jokic has shown that he's also great off the ball. You know how I know that? Because when he has overall as low of a usage rate, at least compared to some of the other players in the league, and overall certain games overall they're still winning, and he only has digit shots attempted, and he's shooting 63% from the field. You know what that tells me? That tells me all in all, once again, that he dominates off the ball as well. That tells me that when he does get the ball in his hands, he is severely efficient. Severely efficient.
The reason I asked that question was for the simple fact that what I'm saying is I don't know the criteria no more. I don't know if it's because it's the number 1 seed. I don't know if it's the number 6 seed. I don't know how you judging it. Is we judging off of advanced stats or who's the most valuable player? You take them off this team. We don't know. We don't know, but
you judge it off of all that, Perk. It's really not that hard to figure out. Now, if you maybe were to argue that maybe Nikola Jokic overall, that maybe he could have lost to Joel Embiid last year, maybe you could argue that, but there's still a strong case that Nikola Jokic got it last year. Because I believe that he was slightly statistically in terms of advantage overall to that of Joel Embiid. And by the time of the playoffs, of course, they ended up losing to the Warriors, but they also had a riddled amount of injuries. They were pretty much never going to make it anywhere. But once again, Nikola Jokic, he is going to have to win the NBA championship, especially this season. The expectations should be to win an NBA championship. Because in terms of the NBA West, I don't really see a team that is going to majorly compete with them, at least of Nikola Jokic, if he truly is 3-time MVP caliber material and out of the playoffs. When it comes down to so we are going to have to see overall maybe possibly the shot attempts get up a little bit when it comes down to it and the level of play, him take over in certain playoff games. Because the LA Clippers, in my opinion, they should not be able to beat them. I don't trust them. Overall, when it comes down to it, the Dallas Mavericks, they're very talented, but I don't think all in all that I would trust them over the Denver Nuggets. At least Nikola Jokic should be able to beat them. The Golden State Warriors look like they're in a little bit of a revival or rebuild state. I don't see them winning the championship again this year. Maybe they'll be a threat a little bit later on down the line, but they're still getting a little bit older, and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, they're not necessarily the same. So these next few years is going to be very revelatory of Mr. Nikola Jokic and whoever also is out there in the West when it comes down to it. The biggest threat to them, if John Morant ends up coming back, might be that of the Memphis Grizzlies, but we'll see what ends up happening with that. We'll see, because I'm not really sure if I trust a certain amount of the other teams in that conference. We'll see what happens, even though there's some very talented team members and talented teams out there. And then, of course, you got to worry about the East. You got to worry about Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks, and possibly Joel Embiid with the 76ers, the Philadelphia 76ers. Those are the only two teams that Nikola Jokic should possibly lose to this season. He at least has to make the NBA Finals, in my opinion. Easily. I'm not going to say easily, but he should be able to make it. No doubt about it. Those have to be the expectations, and he should be able to win the NBA championship. You're a 3-time consecutive MVP. At least it looks that way. You're going to have to win the NBA championship. Period.
You know this, since you do want to bring it up, we do know this, that when it comes to MVP voting, 80% of the voters are white American. 20% are others. I know that stat. If you want to talk about advanced stat, I do know that one. Now let's talk about this year.
That's cool, Kendrick Perkins overall. That's cool. At the end of the day, what he said at the end. Anyway, overall, that's cool, Kendrick Perkins. But once again, you have to really try and connect with that point and see, okay, is that really overall the main benefactor to why Nikola Jokic is looked at as the main MVP? Or is it because he's doing something that we've almost never seen before with the center? Once again, the man is shooting 63% from the field, and a lot of his shots come from long range or mid range shots. He, of course, also can get it on the inside and work in the paint a little bit, but Nikola Jokic is a great long range shooter. And on top of that, the man is shooting 40% from three,
And let's talk about the stat pad.
while averaging 10 rebounds when it comes down to it all in all, and over 10 assists.
I said was, I'm never taking anything from when it comes down to Jokic being one of the most skilled big, if not the most skilled big to ever play the game. I'm not taking away nothing from what his IQ is and his level of play and how he's able to make others around him better. But I will give a...
What I will say is this: if you are going to make the point that a lot of people are claiming that Nikola Jokic is the greatest center, or not the greatest, excuse me, but the best skilled center ever, or the best center that we've ever seen, then you should be able to win the NBA championship this year. Because you do have a couple of possibly all-star caliber players on that team. I'm not going to say that they're the most talented team that I've ever seen, but they're talented enough overall to compete with a certain amount of the other contenders, especially in that of the West. I also forgot, of course, you have the Phoenix Suns now with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. That's going to be another team on the know that is going to be decently competitive. We'll see what happens, especially now with Kevin Durant. Nikola Jokic, in my opinion, the expectations have to be this season that he has to win the NBA championship. So we'll see overall what ends up happening with that.
A lot of credit to the front office for surrounding him with the pieces that fit around him. When you go out and get an Aaron Gordon, who's one of the best cutters in the world. When you go out and go get a Bruce Brown, who's also a hell of a slasher, Jeff Green, things to that nature. And you know that you need those type of players in order to play off of him. When you go get, when you have...
So your point basically, bruh, is that Nikola Jokic, that he shouldn't necessarily be the MVP overall, or that it's not a closed case yet, because look at the talent around him. That's basically the same shit that Aaron Rodgers fanboys and LeBron James fanboys and other loser fanboys, when it comes down to it, always say when their favorite athlete overall is not winning in the same way that they were expecting them to, or that they wanted to. Oh, well, it's a team game. When it comes down to they have greater talent and all sort of stuff. And sometimes that's a little bit of a valid excuse. But oftentimes it's just a big fat excuse overall that is not valid. Like when people try to bring it up with LeBron James or Aaron Rodgers. Like people say, oh, well, Aaron Rodgers, it's not his fault that he never won. He never had the defense. It's bullshit. The only time that Aaron Rodgers actually has ever won overall a Super Bowl, or even sniffed one when it came down to it, was when he debatably had the best defense in the whole entire damn league. That was the only time, or at least overall top 2 or top 5 within the league that year. When it came down to it, oh, well, he didn't have the receivers. Bullshit. At one point in time, he had Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. And then later on, he had the number 1 receiver in Devontae Adams. Still couldn't get to another Super Bowl. Spare me the bullshit. And then with LeBron James, oh, apparently he doesn't have the talent. Get the fuck out of here. The man worked with Dwayne Wade, Ray Allen when he was a bit older, sure, but with also Chris Bosh, then Kevin Love, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis. The man has had more all-star help than any other top 10 player I've ever seen. Like, get the fuck out of here. People overall can always say this shit about, oh, this guy has more talent in town, all this other shit. At the end of the day, Nikola Jokic's team, you could debate, at least if I remember the teammates all know that are still in the Milwaukee Bucks, with Chris Middleton and I believe Drew Holiday, if they still end up having him there, and Brook Lopez and a couple of the other players that I believe are still there, the teams are somewhat comparable. Now, if you want to maybe debate that Denver is slightly more talented, maybe you could debate that when it comes down to it. But let's not overall change the goalpost. Once again, overall, Mr. Kendrick Perkins, as you were saying before, because there are a lot of players in the past that won the MVP even when it looked like they had the most talented team or they had great help, such as Larry Bird, Magic Johnson when it comes down to it, and a certain amount of other players, LeBron James. So let's not go there.
Shooters like Michael Porter Jr., when you have a shooter like Murray, those players complement him well with the system that he has around him. And I'm not discrediting what he's doing. Now, when I brought up to you, what you ignored was when I asked you, I said, hey, JJ, you've been in locker rooms. You know exactly what the hell I'm talking about when I say about stat pattern, right? I said, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the world knows it, JJ. It's not a crime. It's not a crime that your team wants you to go out there and get something. We just witnessed it with Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, but come on, Kendrick. Let's just not sit here and act overall like, oh, well, I was just making the point overall that everyone stat pads and he didn't like it. No, that's not the only point that you made. The point that you were trying to make is that overall that, Nikola Jokic, this is a guy that, how can I even truly call him the true MVP? He's not even top 10 in scoring, which, as JJJ mentioned, is a retarded point if you actually know anything about basketball.
2 nights ago, he was 1 rebound.
And once again, like I said, maybe if Nikola Jokic was averaging 15 or 17 points per game, then you would have a point. Because then you can say, well, his sample size all in all, of course he has a high percentage because he's not even averaging 20 points per game, and he's a center. So how can we really overall say that he's having as big of an impact as what some people are alleging? Then maybe you could allege that, but the man is averaging 24 points per game.
From getting a triple-double, and you know what happened? I saw his teammates over there saying, basically telling him, do it, Giannis, do it, Giannis. He tried it. The league rescinded it. So what? It happens around the league. And I brought awareness to it, and people got offended because it does happen. And guess what? It's okay.
Right. But once again, Mr. Kendrick, you were not just alleging all in all that, Nikola Jokic, he's looking after his stats. I think a certain amount of people would be a little bit understandable to that. But some of the points that you were trying to mention, you were trying to discredit Jokic, especially, let's be real, in not the most intelligent of ways.
It's okay if it do happen. But my thing is, let's not sit up here and crown or sit up here and play this game about, it's just a runaway favorite for us with the MVP candidate and it's not even close. Because I would not.
Well, that's overall the best point that you've made. That's pretty much about the only point overall that I think overall that is pretty much a banger from you, or all in all, in my opinion, I would somewhat agree. I won't say that it's a complete runaway race because in my opinion, Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's actually right there. Now, in my opinion, Nikola Jokic, he probably still would be first, but Giannis Antetokounmpo is right there. And if Nikola Jokic overall does lose a certain amount of more games, Giannis, you certainly could debate, does deserve to be the number one all in all MVP candidate. Joel Embiid, of course, in my opinion, he's a little bit further behind both of them, but he's somewhat relatively in that same conference or that same room overall at number 3. And then at number 4, I don't know, but those are pretty much the only 3 within the conversation.
I would not allow Joel Embiid. I would not allow Giannis Antetokounmpo to be disrespected. Giannis Antetokounmpo is averaging a career high in points right now. Team has the best record in the league. Joel Embiid has had, I don't even know the numbers of 40-point games that he has had, but it haven't been done since Shaq, and it's by a landslide. The number of 40-point games he done put up this season. And you can't sit up.
That's the greatest point overall, once again, that you've made so far throughout this whole entire debate. To be honest, it's probably the best point that you've ever made within NBA analyst history. Because most of the points that Kendrick Perkins makes are absolutely retarded. But it is what it is. Anyways, when it comes down to it, I agree with Kendrick there. I don't think it's quite as runaway as what some people are alleging. I do think that Giannis is right there. I'm going to say that it's about 60-40 in favor of Nikola Jokic right now. But there still is about 20 games left, I believe. Maybe give or take. I can't remember exactly how many. So, Nikola Jokic does have to work his ass off to continue getting that MVP.
And tell me that Luka and Embiid is not watching to see the point differential for us, who's going to lead the league in scoring. It happens, JJ, and you know it happens. So for you to come over here and say, that's not who Jokic is. That's not the type of person he is. It's not in his nature. Before Giannis did what he did 2 nights ago, did anybody think it was in his nature?
Right, KP.
Did anybody know how he was feeling?
Let JJ I want to just say something. Stephen A. I mean no offense to you, and I mean no offense to First Take, because I think this show is extremely valuable. It is an honor to be on this desk every day. It really is. But what we've just witnessed is the problem with this show, where we create narratives that do not exist in reality. The implication, what you are implying, that the white voters that vote on NBA are racist, that they favor white people. You just said that. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. That is exactly what you implied, Kendrick Perkins. That is exactly what you implied. Secondly, hold on.
I did not call. I stated the facts. And you're not about to sit up.
We all know what you
Look at Steve.
implied the other day. We all know what you implied just now. Hold on.
I stated it's the facts. It's the facts.
Well, what I'll say is this. Yes, it's the facts on all that the majority of NBA voters, especially overall within that of the media, yes, they're Caucasian. You can make that, but overall, are you actually going to be able to make a point to the fact overall that Nikola Jokic is getting more favorable treatment overall than that of past players? Maybe you could debate that if you're maybe going to compare that of the Giannis take when it comes down to it, but if you're comparing it to that of Joel Embiid or other players, or especially that of Russell Westbrook and James Harden, I just don't think that that comparison can really be fairly made. And the reason why that is because Russell Westbrook and James Harden, what people really figured out about those guys very quickly is that those guys that probably without dominating the ball throughout the majority of the game, they can't put up those type of numbers. And on top of that, they repeatedly failed within the playoffs. At least with Nikola Jokic, one thing you can say about him is that he does it within the flow of the game. He has a decent amount of higher IQ than both of those players, and he does it on way, 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 way higher efficiency. Way higher efficiency. Of course, it is still a regular season award, but I don't think that you can really compare Jokic to that of James Harden and Russell Westbrook because he's a completely different player, and he averages his triple doubles in a completely different way than what a Russell Westbrook or what a James Harden do.
Okay.
Secondly, no one said that players don't stat pad. No one said that players aren't aware of their stats within a game. You're talking about Giannis doing it. That has nothing to do with Nikola Jokic. My point that I made the other day, which is a valid point and which I will stand by, is that Nikola Jokic does not care. What he cares about doesn't fit your narrative. So,
well, I'm actually not going to say that he doesn't care. A person all in all that is about to be on the verge of winning his third straight MVP, you have to care. I don't think that there's any debate about that whatsoever, in my opinion. Nikola Jokic can say whatever he wants. I don't believe that he doesn't care. But if you're going to allege that Nikola Jokic is stat padding, especially in the way that Perkins is trying to allege, at least from what I got from it, somewhat in the same way that a Russell Westbrook was, and he's saying, oh, why is Nikola Jokic not getting the same criticism? You can't compare those two things, once again, because they're not getting them in the same way at all.
Your narrative to discredit him somehow, to discredit what he's doing, it's not based in reality, Perk. And no one is disrespecting Giannis. No one is disrespecting Joel Embiid. Look, earlier in the season, you could have made an argument for Luka for MVP. You could have made an argument for Tatum. Right now, 65 games, with 17 to go, there's 3 guys you can make an argument for. And they all have valid arguments. Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic, they all have valid arguments. Nobody's discrediting them. What is the evidence? I want to know. Because this is what you do. You're implying something. You're saying something. Jokic stat pad. No, he doesn't.
No,
white voters favor white Europeans. No, they don't.
No.
That's what you're saying.
No. What I made a fact of, I didn't. Time out. What I made a statement on was that I said it happens around the league. Along with Jokic, people knows what goes on. And for you to sit up...
Right, but Perk, no shit. What is really overall the main point that you're trying to say? Anyone can really say that. Of course, every single player overall pays attention to their stats. So, of course, I'll disagree with JJ Redick overall on that point because I think that every player cares to a certain degree. But, dude, what is the real point that you're trying to make? Yes, we all know that every player, especially during the MVP race, that they give a shit about their stats. No shit. Are you trying to allege overall once again that Nikola Jokic, that he is less deserving of the MVP because of his shot attempts? Because that is pretty much the statement all in all that you said.
Here. And for you to come on here and you to say, that's not who Jokic is. Like, how in the hell do you know how another man is feeling inside? That's what I want to ask you. How the hell you know? A pair of lips could say anything. So listen, hold on, time out.
And I do agree with that.
I've been around him every day because I talk to Mike Malone, who's been around him for 8 years.
How would they?
You can learn a lot by listening. You can learn a lot by listening to people. How they talk about people.
Nobody knows how somebody feels. Nobody knows how somebody feeling inside. Like, what are we?
Well, what I will say is this, and I agree with Perk overall to a certain degree. You never know truly 100% how a person is feeling unless you're really them when it comes down to it. And then even sometimes people have a hard time knowing truly how they feel when it comes out, because some people overall, they just don't have that ability, at least to the greatest of degrees, overall with that of introspection. But anyways, when it comes down to it all in all, I understand certainly what he is implying. However, what you can usually tell overall with what's important to certain players is the way that they play and overall the results that they bring. Russell Westbrook and James Harden showed long ago that MVPs and stat pattern was way more important than really ever winning, because they can never really do it in any other way. Now, James Harden and Russell Westbrook now, of course, now that they're getting in their mid-30s, overall they're trying to win now because they realize that this is pretty much their last chance. But when it comes to Nikola Jokic, when it comes down to him once again, you can't really compare him to those type of players.
Talking about right now, and the reason that I
Why even imply it? Why even imply it? Why even imply it with Jokic then? Why even imply it?
Can I talk for a second? The reason that I brought it up was when we started talking about triple doubles. All I said was, and Stephen A., you could correct me if I'm wrong. I said that when Russ was averaging a triple double.
And here we go, get to the main point, which is pretty much what I predicted. I seen certain players like Russell Westbrook, James Harden overall, get criticized in the media with averaging triple doubles. Why is Nikola Jokic not getting overall criticized for quote-unquote stat padding? That's really all this is mainly about, in my opinion. But once again, Kendrick Perkins is such a fucking idiot overall, even for a former basketball player, that he doesn't see the difference. Russell Westbrook and James Harden are two guys that literally need the #1 usage rate throughout the whole entire NBA, at least from what I remember. And they need the ball within their hands overall. They need to dominate the ball throughout the whole entire game and have a decent amount of shots, way more shots than what Nikola Jokic, can do. James Harden and Russell Westbrook, for them to usually get 24 points, they need to do that probably on a decent amount of more shots than what a Nikola Jokic can do. Nikola Jokic can give you 20 points, all in all, when it comes down to it, sometimes on like 12 shots or 12 or 15 shots when it comes down to it. When it comes overall to that overall of that James Harden and that of Russell Westbrook, it takes them usually a little bit more. Sometimes it may take them overall 20, sometimes even a little bit higher amount of shots.
Hey, he was getting crucified. He was getting crucified for stealing Stephen Adams' rebounds. But hold on.
Perk, I understand what you're trying to bring up, but it's a moot point. And the reason why it's a moot point, once again, is because those two players are not comparable. The reason why Russell Westbrook and James Harden eventually got so damn criticized with chasing after those damn stats is that people eventually realized you ain't going to do nothing else overall but chase stats in the regular season anyway. And they're not really as impactful as what they come across. And eventually the NBA media and the public overall, which is pretty much the most important thing overall, because if you can convince the public overall of a lot of things, you can convince overall a lot of people of certain things when it comes down to it, when it comes down overall to the media coverage. But when it comes down to it all in all, once the audience started realizing, and once overall there were certain stories and certain analyzations of what Russell Westbrook and James Harden overall, what they truly were, when it came down to it, it pretty much was over. Because then people realized, well, how valuable are you really? Sure, you overall do all this shit in the regular season, but it takes overall, once again, a certain amount of efficiency away from the team, because you're doing it on an infinite amount of more shots when it comes down to it, and you have to dominate the ball. James Harden and Russell Westbrook cannot do that without dominating the ball. Nikola Jokic can.
Stop. Jokic didn't want to, but listen to what I'm saying about the triple doubles. He was getting crucified, and it was clips going around saying, oh, you know what? Russell Westbrook, look at him. Steven Adams boxing out, he going to grab a rebound. But guess what advanced stats and analytics could tell us? That, hey, if Russ grabbed a rebound, you could hurry up and start the break. You can hurry up and push and transition. That's what the advanced stats and the analytics will say, or the court on the camera will say. They'll say.
The analytics also tell us, Kendrick Perkins, that they win out in the first round every single year. Now, one could also say that Nikola Jokic, that he has not been super duper successful in the playoffs either. But in terms of the impact, you can't really even compare those two. Yes, you can take a look at it and say, oh, with the triple doubles all in all, why is he not getting, once again, it's completely different. It's completely different overall with averaging the amount of stats that Nikola Jokic is averaging overall. Once again, he brought up the point, Mr. Kendrick Perkins brought up the point that they're still winning games with Nikola Jokic still shooting singles in terms of shot attempts. And he's still averaging the statistics that he's doing. You know what that tells me once again? He is extraordinarily dominant off the ball. Even if the ball is not in his hands 24/7 like it needs to be with a James Harden or that overall of a Russell Westbrook, he can still overall do an infinite amount better than them because that's how efficient and dominant he is and intelligent.
Why was Steven Adams? Hold on, listen for a second. Why was Steven Adams box out, grab a rebound, have to worry about finding Russ getting open when you're taking 3 or 4 seconds off the 24-second shot clock? That's what the advanced and the coaching staff would say to his defense. So with my point,
right, but Kendrick, when you take a look at the stats that actually matter, Russell Westbrook overall was about number 1 in usage rate or up there in the top 5 pretty much every single year. He led the league in turnovers almost every single goddamn year when it came down to, and when it really came to the elite of the elite teams, he never usually beat those guys. And once again, he did all that on like 43% shooting. Like, give me a goddamn break.
What I'm telling you is
you're telling me to listen for a minute, my brother. I've been listening for 12. I just want to chime in and say,
but you've been letting JJ talk. What you talking
I let
about?
both of y'all, hold on. I let both of y'all talk. That's not true. I let both of y'all talk. I haven't said anything.
All right, go ahead.
I gave the segment to y'all. That's
go
number
ahead.
1. All right? JJ, let me say a couple of things. Number 1, I did not agree with what Kendrick Perkins said when he talked about Nikola Jokic stat padding. I just want to make that very, very clear.
I know.
However,
I watched the segment.
I know. However, it is important.
These two overall seem a little bit snarky overall this episode. I know. I watched the segment. I need you guys to tell me that, Steve.
Important to point out 2 things. Number 1, Kendrick Perkins is absolutely right when he talked about the heat that Russell Westbrook was taking when he was recording those triple-doubles. He was taking a lot of heat at that particular moment in time. That's number 1. And number 2, when
Well, Russell Westbrook was receiving a lot of heat once overall people figured out that you ain't never going to be anything more than a first-round wonder. That's overall what people figured out. Now, a lot of people, of course, would say, well, what about Nikola Jokic? He's made the Western Conference Finals once, and he also went out in the first round last year. Yes, but once again, Nikola Jokic, you can tell, is a much more intelligent and much more efficient player. And on top of that, when it comes down to Nikola Jokic, one could argue that, he's been in the way to more superior teams where Russell Westbrook and James Harden, they've repeatedly choked or overall turned during times in the playoffs to where they've been in 50-50 matchups to where they just did not come up overall that big because when it came down to it, once again, they did not have the intelligence or they flamed out like that of a James Harden. But once again, the MVP, of course, is out of a regular season award. But that more than likely is why, when it comes down to why Nikola Jokic is probably about to get his 3rd straight MVP. The better comparison, if you were trying to argue something with Kendrick Perkins, would maybe be that of the Giannis comparison.
Nash won the league MVP. There were a whole bunch of folks that had an issue with it not being given to Shaq instead of him. And a lot of folks
and Kobe Bryant, because that Kobe Bryant fan base is absolutely fucking crazy. But anyway,
were African American. Yes, that's true. Now I wouldn't go any further than that, but I'm just saying that's a reality.
And that's not me saying overall that the Kobe Bryant fan base is necessarily crazy for possibly believing that he could have won the MVP that year. I don't really have a problem with that. But in my experience, whenever you're debating a Kobe Bryant fan, they're overall like a crackhead. They make no logical sense overall whatsoever. They're the craziest fan base that I personally ever had the pleasure of dealing with, if you want to call it that, overall in terms of really any sport.
Reality that was transpiring. And as it pertains to First Take, listen, I don't take any offense with what you said. I get where you're coming from. But I would remind you, there are a plethora of debate shows that tackle these issues, some more than others because they don't have 2 hours of television real estate. They're not number 1, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality of the situation is this is not the only place where these subjects get tackled. So when you bring that up, I just want to point that
Stephen A. Smith trying to save his job.
That out, okay? 100%. At the end of the day, that's all I wanted to say. Outside of that, the only other point that I would add is this, and I'd like you to address this, but I want to go back to Kendrick Perkins to make sure he said all the points that he wanted to say. When Kendrick Perkins brings up, Nikola Jokic and how do you know what's inside of his head? JJ, only thing that I would say to you is, you know what he's told you. You know what teammates have told you. But in this industry, we can point to many, many facts caught on camera where guys say one thing and then they retire and they admit that this was what was on their mind. This is what happened. They weren't.
I would agree. a lot of the times you really cannot take people at face value, really, really in a lot of things. So I agree with Steve and Kendrick on that one.
Necessarily forthcoming or honest about what their intentions are. So it's a difference between saying, Jokic didn't tell me that. I don't believe that that's how Jokic is. And I don't believe that either. I don't believe he's stat padded. But what I'm saying is it's entirely plausible that that might be something that he's doing, and it's something that he's not willing to admit. So I don't think it's completely off kilter what Kendrick Perkins is saying. And I understand where you're coming from because you spoke to the man yourself. You spoke to his teammates. They gave you their perspective, and you believe it. And that's all I wanted to say.
Can I just say one thing quickly before we pick it back up? Also, as far as the problem with First Take in terms of like pushing narratives, I just want to say this because obviously, JJ, Perk, you guys are cream of the crop, best of the best. Love having you on the show. But
well, I don't think that Kendrick Perkins has ever been the cream of the crop or the creme de la creme of anything. I think all in all that he was a guy that pretty much was a bench warmer all in all in the NBA, and I think he's a bench warmer as an analyst, but that's just my view. Anyways, that's pretty much about it for this conversation. I thought that was a very interesting debate, but it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up winning the NBA MVP this season. I believe that Nikola Jokic more than likely will get it, as long as they continue somewhat of their success and they at least have a comparable record to that of the Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo within at least 1 or 2 games. So we'll see overall what happens. Hopefully for Nikola Jokic, he does not end up blowing that, but we'll see what happens. As for in terms of it being a open and shut case, I'm not really going to go that far because I think Giannis is right there with him, and Joel Embiid probably in a little bit of a distant third. You know, you can maybe say he's still in the race, but I think more than likely that it's still either going to be Giannis or Nikola Jokic when it comes down to it, or Nikola Jokic, however you pronounce his name, when it comes down to it. So it's going to be very particularly interesting. And as for the championship, it's going to be very particularly interesting to see who's going to win this year. Because I can see maybe, probably 3 specific teams as favorite. I can maybe see a little bit more than that, around 6 contenders. It's going to be very interesting. But Nikola Jokic is going to have to make a serious run for the championship this year. And in my opinion, his expectations are going to have to be to have that NBA trophy. So we'll see what happens, that NBA Finals trophy. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's right about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see how this transpires.